Auburn football is typically a proud program that sees a lot of success on the field. They've had some pretty special and miraculous seasons over the last decade or so, but last year was extremely disappointing. It ended up with Brian Harsin getting fired, the Tigers missed a bowl game, and they had a couple of really embarrassing performances. That's why they decided to make a switch, and Hugh Freeze is now back in the SEC after a brief pit stop at Liberty. The Tigers have a new head man who has proven to win in the SEC West, have plenty of resources to help the program get back on top, and an influx of talent who could make them competitive in year one. Right now, the truth about Auburn football is I have no idea what to expect. They could either be 10-2 or they could go 2-10. That is how polarized the country is about how Auburn will do this year. But in today's video, we're going to preview them. We're going to talk about last year, go through the roster, talk about who's new, go through the schedule, and I'll give my overall thoughts and prediction. Last year was a complete disaster for Auburn. They were in their second year under head coach Brian Harsin, and while he had a hot start to his tenure in 2021, things quickly fell apart. They lost pretty much every game to finish the 2021 season, had a ton of stuff go on behind the scenes, and lost some big-time players. Many were already ready to fire Harsin before the season began, and pretty early on, it looked like that was going to happen. They took care of Mercer in Week 1 before they survived a scare against San Jose State in Week 2. In Week 3, number 22 Penn State came to town and stomped them 41-12. This game wasn't even competitive and was completely embarrassing. After that, they'd play Missouri at home. As a Mizzou fan, this was the worst college football game I've ever witnessed, as in the last few minutes, neither team wanted to win. Mizzou missed a 15-yard field goal, jumped off sides before Auburn missed a kick, and then as Mizzou was about to win the game and run through the end zone, Nathaniel Pete threw the ball for a touchback, and Auburn won. It was the most ridiculous and embarrassing game, and seemingly was peak Brian Harsin. Still though, Auburn was off to a 3-1 start, so on paper, it looked like they were fine. That would quickly fall apart though. After a competitive loss to LSU, they started to get blown out. They lost 42-10 to Georgia, 48-34 to Ole Miss, 41-27 to Arkansas, and then 39-33 in overtime against Mississippi State. While some of those games were actually decently competitive, this was not what Auburn fans were used to. The quarterback position wasn't great, and overall, there was just so much dysfunction. Eventually, Harsin was fired, and Cadillac Williams would take over as the interim coach. From there, they'd have a couple of wins. They beat Texas A&M 13-10 in early November, and this was absolutely embarrassing for the Aggies, but this was big for them, and then they took care of a decent Western Kentucky team. They were actually 5-6 going into the Bama game, and if they could somehow win that, they'd get to a bowl game and save the season. But, as we all knew, that would not happen. Bama won 49-27, and I'm actually surprised Auburn scored 27 points in that game. They'd end up finishing the year 5-7, with a 2-6 record in the conference. It was absolutely dysfunctional, and it was time to clean the house and restart. So, first and foremost, they ended up bringing in a new head coach in Hugh Freeze from Liberty. They grabbed Phil Montgomery as the offensive coordinator, and Ron Roberts is the defensive coordinator. They also brought in plenty of players in terms of recruiting, as they signed the number 19 overall class and got the third best transfer portal haul. When you take a look at the quarterback position, they're going to return Robbie Ashford, Holden Gariner, and Peyton Thorne. Thorne comes in after starting for 2 years at Michigan State, and Ashford was last year's starter. Gariner may have more potential than both of them, but in my opinion, Thorne is probably going to be the week 1 starter, but the moment he struggles, Ashford probably plays. Ashford's more mobile, and might be better equipped of playing in the SEC than Thorne will. Either way, I'm not super confident in the quarterback room, but Hugh Freeze also typically does well with them. At running back, you're going to bring back Jarquez Hunter. He's far and wide the best running back on the team, and one of the top returning backs in the SEC. Behind him, you have Brian Batty, Damari Alston, Jeremiah Cobb, and Sean Jackson. I like the running back spot, and their transfer Brian Batty from USF is someone to keep an eye on. In terms of the receiver position, that's where things get interesting for me. Apparently, the starters are probably going to be Camden Brown, Jair Shorter, and Javarius Johnson. They also have former LSU transfer Coy Moore, transfer Caleb Burton, and another transfer in Nick Mardner from Cincinnati. Personally, my favorite 2 receivers in the group are Jair Shorter and Shane Hooks, but it looks like Hugh Freeze has plenty of talent on the roster, and this could be the start of a new era of Auburn receivers. At tight end, they'll have Rivaldo Fairweather, who's a transfer from Florida International, and then you'll probably have Tyler Fromm as the backup. The offensive line should be Dylan Wade, Jeremiah Wright, Avery Jones, Tate Johnson, and Gunnar Britton. 4 out of those 5 guys are upperclassmen, and some have a lot of starting experience, so the Auburn line should be pretty decent. If we can get 2021 Peyton Thorne, Jarquez Hunter can take the next step, a couple guys step up at receiver, and the offensive line plays as expected, then Auburn should have a pretty good offense, and I'm very confident in Freeze's ability to get the most out of him. Now, let's take a look at the defense. The 2 players I'm most excited for are their 2 corners in DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchett. Those two are both currently ranked inside the top 100 prospects for the 2024 NFL Draft. Then you also have Zykevius Walker at defensive tackle, Dylan Brooks at outside linebacker, Jason Jones on the defensive line, and Eugene Asante, another linebacker. From there, I'm also excited for guys like Marcus Harris, Justin Rogers, and Kendrick Falk on the defensive line, another linebacker in Cam Riley, and their safeties Caden Bridges and Jalen Simpson. From an outsider's perspective, it looks like Auburn has a good amount of returning experience with some players who have really high ceilings and NFL potential. I can't really tell you how good they'll be, but it looks like overall Auburn has a lot of potential in this roster, a lot of transfer talent, and it seems they're also going under the radar. If these guys live up to their transfer hype and they all mesh, then Auburn can actually surprise some people. But let's first take a look at their schedule and try and figure out what record they'll get. Auburn's 2023 schedule is pretty interesting. In week 1, they're going to get UMass at home, and if they lose that game, there are extreme problems. Auburn has struggled against an inferior opponent at home the last 2 years. They barely beat Georgia State in 2021, and then last year, they struggled with San Jose State. I hope the third time is not the charm, and they lose, but I doubt that happens, and they go 1-0. Week 2 is an interesting matchup, as they play Cal in the night slot. It's no secret that Cal has been struggling the last few years, and while I don't think they're going to be much better, it is now or never for Justin Wilcox, and this could be a huge signature win to help him keep his job. They'll have a new quarterback in Sam Jackson, and I honestly think this game will be close. I think Auburn is the better team, and they'll eventually gain some confidence and win by a touchdown or two and get them to 2-0. After that, they play Samford at home in week 3, and this should get them to 3-0. After that, though, things get a lot more difficult, and that's quick. They go on the road to College Station to play against Texas A&M, and A&M is also a very interesting team. They have plenty of talent and should eventually break out, but it seems we hear that story every year. Auburn won last year in a close one, and I don't think it happens again. I think it is competitive, but A&M will give them their first loss of the year, and things are only going to get more difficult for them. They get Georgia at home, and while a couple years ago this game was competitive, it has not been fun over the last 2, and Georgia's just too good, and they'll win that game. This will put them at 3-2, where they'll then have to play on the road against LSU. They beat LSU in Baton Rouge in 2021 and barely lost last year, so it probably will be competitive, but I just can't in my right mind pick that game right now, and that'll unfortunately drop them to 3-3. After that, this is a very pivotal stretch, as they have 5 games that are somewhat manageable. First, they get Ole Miss at home. I don't think the Rebels will be quite as good as they were the last 2 years, but they also return one of the best backs in the country in Quinshawn Judkins, and Jackson Dart has gotten better, so I really don't know what to believe on them. This game is at home, and while I'd love to pick the upset, I think Ole Miss wins by a touchdown. This will put Auburn at 3-4, but don't worry, a couple wins are coming their way. They get Mississippi State at home, and while I do like Will Rogers, they have a new head coach, and I don't think they're a juggernaut by any means, and this will be Auburn's first conference win of the season. This will get them to their 4th win, and then after that they go on the road to Vanderbilt. Vandy is improving under Clark Lee, but I just don't think they're quite there yet to take down many SEC teams, and this will give Auburn their 5th win of the year. After that, they go on the road to Arkansas, and I think if there's ever a year for Arkansas to have a big year, it has to be now, with both KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders. If this game was at home, I'd probably say Auburn wins, but because it's on the road, I think Arkansas wins, and this will give Auburn their 5th loss. Luckily, they get their tune-up game against New Mexico State, which will get them to 6-5 and have them bowling in year 1. Unfortunately, it doesn't get much easier for them as they play Alabama. Honestly, I don't think it's as far-fetched for Auburn to win this game as many probably think. I have no idea what Vegas's line is, but Auburn always has that game close when it's at home. Hugh Freeze knows how to play against Nick Saban, and it could be a really sneaky game. I mean, 2 years ago, Auburn almost pulled it off with a quarterback who was limping the entire night. It took a Bryce Young comeback for them to win, and while I'm not going to publicly predict Auburn to win this game, I would not be shocked if they did, but I will put it down as a loss, and I have Auburn going 6-6. Their wins come over UMass, Cal, Samford, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, and New Mexico State, with their trap games coming against Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. I could see them winning as many games as 9, and I could also only see them winning 4. I think they'll happily meet in the middle and win 6 or 7, and it will be a successful year 1 for Hugh Freeze. I also do think they're going to pull off some sort of major upset, whether that's against Georgia, LSU, or Bama, I don't know, but Hugh Freeze always seems to do something like that, and it's really going to depend on the quarterback position. Ashford wasn't great last year, and Thorne has a limited ceiling, so we may just have to wait. Either way, I think Auburn does have reason to be cautiously optimistic, and I think Freeze will turn around the program. But what do you guys think? If you're an Auburn fan, what did I get right and wrong? What do you think of Hugh Freeze and the future of the program? And what team should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.